What's up, guys? Colin Gay here, Scarlet and Gray Report podcast. Big night for Ohio State. Um, NFL draft. Obviously, you guys probably saw everything that happened if you guys were following along here at the Scarlet and Gray Report. But I couldn't help but think, okay, like as I'm watching, just trying to put myself in the mind of Brian Hartline. Um, you know, Seeing first of all, let's start at the beginning because it's super interesting, especially with, going into the draft, and I had this written and in that Garrett Wilson would be selected number 8 overall to the Atlanta Falcons, and I had everything written out. This is kind of behind the curtain and things like that, but had a whole thing written down, and then they take Drake London, and then you think I thought about it. I was like, okay, this makes a little sense. Atlanta seems to like to draft bigger receivers, a la Julio Jones. These bigger guys that can, not that Garrett Wilson's, he's 6 foot, he's not that bigger bodied receiver that Drake London is out of USC. It made sense. It ignited a rageful fury from Ohio State Twitter, but it didn't take long for Ohio State to kind of get its response with Garrett Wilson being taken at 10. And then really the story of the night, at least for the Ohio State side, developed, and it really couldn't have been written any better for Brian Hartline. You get Garrett Wilson selected at 10 by the New York Jets. Up next, right after, New Orleans trades up, not only waits to pick, but trades up to get Chris Olave to work with Michael Thomas. You got, and then the very next pick, to kind of round out the trio of receivers that were in Ohio State's 2020 wide receiver room, you got Detroit Lions selecting Jameson Williams, who kind of all 3 were selected or were recruited by Brian Hartline. All 3 were developed by Brian Hartline. And then you get Jameson Williams transferring to Alabama in his final year of college football and becoming a Biletnikoff finalist. If you're Brian Hartline, what I was doing is kind of just trying to, and I wrote a story about this that's up later this morning. But you see this guy who knows what it's like to be a high-level college football receiver coming from Ohio State. He knows what it's like to play in the NFL, having very, very solid and consistent years for the Cleveland Browns and Miami Dolphins, to name 2 teams that he played for. And then, so he knows the best of both worlds. And that, according to what, Zach Carpenter talked to him, our lovely recruiting reporter, and he talked to him, and that's what he said is, I'm not training receivers to be great college receivers. No, he's trying to get them prepared for that next level. And in turn, in that process, that makes them high profile and in high, octane college receivers. And it's in that product was shown Thursday night, even before any one of those 3 took an NFL snap. You see them picked in succession as the first Ohio State receivers to be selected in the first round since 2007. And you're like, oh, Ohio State's building something here. And you've seen that product at the NFL level too, whether it's Michael Thomas, whether it's Terry McLaurin, these guys who were not selected in the first round of the NFL, but still found a way to be very, very successful. The expectation was high, and if you were around Ohio State, talking to players, talking to coaches like I've been, this was not surprising, but just to see it in succession like this, it's the greatest recruiting pitch Ohio State could ever ask for. And it's not only, but the thing is, and I wrote about this too, it's not only about the 3 players in succession that are going off to the NFL, adding to the list of, recruiters for Ohio State, whether that, adding it to Paris Campbell, KJ Hill, Johnny Dixon in the USFL, Michael Thomas and Terry McLaurin in the wide receiver room, let alone all the crap ton of other guys that are, succeeding in very high profile ways at other positions as well. But it's about this day was also about the guys that are currently in Brian Hartline's room, the Emeka Egbukas, Julian Fleming, Jackson Smith and Jigba, who very well could be the first receiver off the board in 2023, and then Marvin Harrison Jr. These guys who are kind of the product of what Brian Hartline's been able to do in this room now. You see guys that are coming up that are responding to this back-to-back-to-back trend that Ohio State created, this storyline that just can only seemingly be cultivated in the span of an Ohio State wide receiver room. Guys responding like Brandon Inniss and Carnell Tate, these targets that Ohio State has been wanting for a while, that have visited Ohio State, that Ohio State seems to be the front runners on. But I mean, they're looking at this and taking notice. We don't know where those guys are going yet, but Ohio State seems to be a very, very good to have a very, very good shot at these guys because of something like this. And that's only going to continue into 2024, 2025. These games, these names we don't know yet really 2026, but we know based on the tendencies that Ohio State has done now, this kind of back-to-back-to-back storyline, that those guys will come, those guys will want to come to Ohio State because of how they develop NFL-ready receivers and what Brian Hartline's approach is. And I think even before we get into kind of, or even though as we praise, Brian Hartline for what he's been able to do, I think one of the main things and one of the aspects that gets severely underrated, even though it kind of doesn't, it's Ryan Day. It's the offense that he's been kind of able to cultivate ever since he arrived at Ohio State. And really that started in my first year, kind of big time covering the team, was 2018 with Dwayne Haskins and his emergence as Ohio State's kind of pro-style quarterback. I mean, you saw a little bit of those changes in JT Barrett in 2017 in Ryan Day's first year with the team. But I mean, Dwayne Haskins was really the one to kind of just create this pro-style wide receiver first offense, with those tandem of those names that I mentioned, the KJ Hills, the Paris Campbells, the Terry McLaurins, at the time, Benjamin Victor, Austin Mack, these guys that are kind of the face of the Ohio State offense at that point. And you saw kind of the potential of what Ohio State could become if they had the right guy at quarterback and the right guy who knew Ryan Day's offense and could kind of run it effectively. You saw that in Justin Fields in his 2 years at Ohio State, and then CJ Stroud, who we'll talk about in a minute. But I mean, just the way that it's almost like between Ryan Day and Brian Hartline, it's almost like the perfect marriage of an offense, combining this pro-style playbook and pro-style quarterback with a wide receiver room that is already talented, that are some of the best players in the country, but want to develop and are developing under the wing of an NFL first guy. I mean, it really is the perfect combination and the perfect marriage for Ohio State. And it gives you the expectation of, okay, this is going to continue as long as Ohio State keeps producing talent like this, which, I mean, over the course of the next few years, as I said earlier, that could happen. I mean, in 2023 and 2024, you could see legitimately three or four first round picks that are coming from Brian Hartline's room as wide receivers. And that's crazy to think about. Definitely three. I mean, whether it's Jackson, Marvin, and Emeka, I mean, those are the three that very, very well could be first round picks before it's all said and done. But you see this combination and I think, I mean, I couldn't help, not only was I thinking about kind of, the succession plan and this growth of the Ohio State offense, but it was CJ Stroud, right? Like, I don't know about you guys, but as I saw Kenny Pickett, who had a wonderful storyline today, I mean, about being selected by, Pittsburgh and staying in the city that kind of created him as a quarterback and, seeing the emotion on his face. And I mean, but, falling that far to the Steelers, I believe at 21, I mean, there was kind of that centerpiece, and this was one of the most exciting drafts that I've ever seen. It was one of the more entertaining nights of television that I've seen in a long time. And personally, I love The Bachelor, so I mean, it was entertaining, but like you see, there wasn't that, unless you view, which I do, Aiden Hutchinson and these defensive guys that were kind of picked at the start of the the draft here. I mean, if there's somebody that you can build around, kind of set a league around and kind of be the face of a franchise, be the face of a league. The NFL didn't have that this year. They didn't really have that quarterback to kind of be like, okay, this is the centerpiece of the 2022 NFL draft class. And because of that, there were a lot of questions, there were a lot of trades, there was a lot of uncertainty tonight. I think heading into next year, I mean, the two centerpieces at this point, I mean, even three, I mean, one of them's linebacker Will Anderson, who's honestly, I mean, I'm in a dynasty league. That's the dude I want, is Will Anderson. But it's going to be CJ Stroud and Bryce Young. And especially CJ Stroud, I mean, you saw the reaction that he was getting from NFL teams, at Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson's pro day. I mean, it was the CJ Stroud show, guys. I mean, and you knew this. We talked about this. I mean, he was circled around, Lovie Smith and Pep Hamilton from the Houston Texans after the showcase, and with Mike Vrabel standing with his arms crossed, making sure that they weren't stealing like state secrets or anything. But I mean, this guy's going to be taken high. I mean, not only is he going to be the face of Ohio State in 2022, he very, very well could develop into the face of college football. I mean, especially with the high profile game that Ohio State has to start with Notre Dame. You got the storyline against Michigan to end the year. If Ohio State is able to come back and have a vengeance and then soar into the playoff again, I mean, Stroud could be the face of college football when it's all said and done. And he's already succeeded when the lights have been on. I mean, he's already been that guy who can kind of be the face of Ohio State, be the face and kind of be, be that guy and be pulled and be, fueled by adversity and the pressure and all that stuff. I mean, you saw that after he finished fourth in the Heisman voting. This guy who came out in the Rose Bowl, instead of sulking and being leading an offense that really didn't have anything to prove in the Rose Bowl, they came back, they stormed back and had one of the best performances in Ohio State history on offense. So there is a lot of pressure here. There is a lot of storylines here, and especially with CJ. I mean, as soon, and I don't know about you guys, but when I was watching this draft, I mean, yes, tomorrow and on Saturday, there's going to be a lot of, Ohio State players picked, Jeremy Ruckert, Thayer Munford, Nicholas Petit-Frere, Haskell Garrett, Tyreek Smith, possibly Master Teague, could all be selected in the NFL draft. But my thought, and I assume the thought of many of you guys out there, it's not on those guys. It's on 2023. And as soon as Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave were picked in the first round of the NFL draft this year, my mind went immediately to 2023. Okay, what could happen with CJ next year? Could he be the first overall pick? Could Jackson Smith-Njigba be second or third or fourth or fifth, depending on how well he does in an Ohio State uniform this year? I mean, to a lesser extent, could Paris Johnson or DeJuan Jones develop into first round picks? I mean, that's kind of where my thought went after this first round, and it was an extremely exciting first round. But really, that just shows the potential and just the reemergence and kind of the refueling of talent that Ohio State has going on offense right now, because of a guy like Ryan Day, because of a guy like Brian Hartline. You like how I circle back there, guys? But it's true, and it will only continue as long as Ryan Day and Brian Hartline continue this train of just consistency and offensive just explosion and NFL preparedness, because that's only going to help Ohio State moving forward. And it'll be just absolutely interesting to see, yes, how these guys do, how Jameson Williams and Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson do at the NFL level. But it will be even more interesting to see, okay, now that the expectation is on Ohio State, now that that seal has been broken, that Ohio State has had first-round receivers, not in 2007, but in 2022, what does that mean for the program moving forward? What kind of guys can Ohio State get? Can they secure a Brandon Ennis and a Carnell Tate, two of them in every year? Could they continue to develop? Who is Bryson Rodgers in this? Just all these kind of questions that continue to cultivate around kind of the same question of how good could this Ohio State offense be? Because that's what this draft was about for Ohio State Thursday night. Was this is how good these receivers were, and they were all in the same room together. They were all recruited by the same guy. That's what the storyline is for Ohio State coming out of Thursday. And there's going to be so much more to talk about, so much more to discuss, and so much more to kind of project heading into next year. But kind of wanted to get just my thoughts on record here for you guys. Please continue this conversation. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about what Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson and Jameson Williams and Aiden Hutchinson and Kyle Hamilton and Derek Stingley Jr. Okay. Oh God. But let's talk about what all these guys can do at the NFL level, who will shine, who will make an impact at that next level. Join our family, join the board. Let's continue this conversation. Follow me on Twitter at Colin Gay _rivals. Follow the site on Twitter at Ohio ST _rivals. Follow our just incredible recruiting reporter, Zach Carpenter, ZACK _Carp. We're going to have plenty of content coming in over the next few days regarding the NFL draft, heading into a major recruiting point. What does this mean for Ohio State recruiting-wise moving forward? All of that will come here soon. So keep an eye out. Ohio State Rivals, Scarlet and Gray Report. Follow us. Join the family. We'll see you guys soon. See you guys on the board.